LWC development is one of the most important skills one should think about pursuing if you are already in Salesforce ecosystem. If you are well versed with LWC, chances are you are already in demand with multiple job opportunities available in the market. If you are still new or learning LWC, don't worry, this tutorial is exactly what you should watch. Hi everyone, my name is Gaurav and you are watching SFDC Rocks 247. If you are watching my tutorial for the first time, please subscribe to my channel and click on the bell icon to receive important notifications of the new contents being added. Today in this tutorial we are going to talk about different ways in which we can communicate with Salesforce data using LWC. We will see how each of these methods render in the UI. We will also go through the code snippet for each one of these methods and try to understand them line by line. So let's get started. With Salesforce data with LWC are: number 1, using base Lightning components which are built on Lightning Data Service. Number 2, using JS wire adapters which are built on Lightning Data Service. And number 3, using Apex. So before we all of these different methods, it is very important for us to know how Lightning Data Service works and why is it so important in the overall communication between Salesforce data and LWC. So Lightning Data Service manages all the data and changes that we make to the Salesforce database. It handles all the saves, updates and deletes that are done on the LWC level and that are reflected on the Salesforce data. Lightning Data Service maintains a client-side cache. So Lightning Data Service creates a duplicate copy of Salesforce data in our browser cache. So this performance of our LWC component and the overall experience for the client. We will go more deep on the cache part, how this works. The service is built on top of user interface API, which is the core foundation for building Lightning experience and Android and iOS applications. In our next slide, we are going to understand how it from different layers and then communicates with Salesforce database, and how each method is different, which ones are on the client side, which ones are on the server side, and each one of these through this diagram. So at the very bottom of the pyramid we have Salesforce database, and on top of that we have Salesforce user interface API, and on top of that we have the Lightning Data Service, and base components and wire adapters are built on Lightning Data Service. So when building LWC components, we can use either of these two options, base component or wire adapters, to build our Lightning Web components. Another route, we can directly make a call to our Apex class, which then makes a call to our Salesforce database, and then the data is returned back to LWC component. See inside this rectangle, the ones which are highlighted, which are colored in blue, all of these reside on the UI, on the client side. These APIs, these services are provided by the Salesforce framework, the Lightning framework, which makes it very easy for us to build LWC components. The Apex resides on the server side. So whenever we make a call to Lightning Data Service using wire adapter, the data is returned in the browser and saved in the browser cache. Then retrieves the data from browser cache and so shows it in the UI. Ask a question like, if someone goes back to the Salesforce database and updates the record, what happens to the cache? So the Lightning Service framework, there is a system behind it. There is a period within which the browser cache is refreshed, and it makes a query, it makes a server call and calls the Salesforce database and retrieves the latest data and saves it in the cache. In videos we will go deep on how the browser cache works. We will have a code example on how we can manually refresh our browser cache. And video, it's very important we understand the Lightning Data Service architecture and how the data flows and what the cache is. That is the base Lightning components. There are 3 standard base Lightning components which are built on Lightning Data Service. Record form, second is Lightning Record View form, and third one is Lightning Record Edit Form. Let's navigate to our Salesforce UI and see how does the Lightning like. So account record, I have created an LWC component which is built on Lightning Record Form. As you can see, we have 5 fields with values and we have a pen icon. When we click on the pen icon, the page transforms into an edit form, save and cancel button at the bottom. You can also see the field types, like the type field is a pick list, and in the UI we can see it as a pick list. So Lightning Data Service takes care of all of these. Now let's go over to our VS Code and see what to write to build this. So this is our HTML page, and this you can see we have just imported the Lightning Record Form base component, and we have passed base component. First one is the object API name, second one is the record ID, third one is the record field. Let's go over to our JavaScript code. Here what we have done is we have created an array of fields that we want to show in the UI. And we have imported these fields using Salesforce schema account form. So this is the signature that we have to follow. We have to first mention @Salesforce /schema/ the object name and the field API name. So this should be the object API name and this should be the field API name that you want to show in the UI. We are importing it and saving it to this variable. Then we have created an array of all the fields that we want to show, basically references of all the fields that we want to show in the UI. Then we are using @API to get the record ID and the object API name. So as we are using our LWC component in Lightning pages, these fields get auto-populated. Gets populated with the record ID, that is this, the account record ID, and the object API name is also gets populated with the API name of the object, that is account. We are then using these variables in our Lightning Record Form base component, and that's it. Just using a couple of lines, we are able to render this beautiful screen which has got all the functionalities for a save, create, view. So basically it performs all the CRUD operations. Make an update to any of the fields, click on the save button, it gets saved, the Lightning Data Service kicks in, it saves the data in our database, retrieves the latest changes, and then shows us the latest changes in the UI. So this is the power of Lightning Data Service. We don't have to connect with Salesforce data. We have not written a code to connect with Salesforce data, do any SQL query. We haven't called any Apex class. By just using this base component, the Lightning Data Service is able to identify, okay, this object I have to call, and this is the record that I have to call for this object, and these are the fields that I want to query and show it in the UI. So all the CRUD operations are performed based on these attributes that are provided. So this is that simple. Go over to the documentation of Lightning Record Form, where you can see different configuration options, different specifications. Like in our use case, we have used account. You can see which are the supported objects, what are the different modes that you can show this form, and different layout types. So we used fields, but you can also use layout types if you want to show a particular layout type in your LWC component. So make sure you go through this documentation. And Lightning component that we are going to talk about is Lightning Record View Form. So as the name suggests, Lightning Record View Form, using Lightning Record View Form, we can build a form which is just read-only. In our account example, we have created a tab and we have an LWC component which uses Lightning Record View Form. And here we are showing these 5 fields as a code. So let's go through our VS Code and see the code that we have to write to build this form. So as you can see, we have used the base component for Lightning Record View Form. Similar to our previous example, we have used object API name and then the record ID, and we have included these lines here. So previously, in our previous example, in our record form, we just had to mention the fields as an array, but in our lightning record view form, we have used lightning output field and the field name that we want to show. And data, lightning data service takes care of binding the data from Salesforce database and showing it on this field. But we have to make sure that the API name of this field reference is correct. Let's go over to our JS code. So similar to our previous example, we are importing all these fields that we want to show in the UI. We are storing them in a variable. So these are just field references. We are referring to the exact location. It's like locating a particular file in your computer. So we have the object name, then we have the object API name, then we have the field API name. We are storing the references in these fields, and in our output field, lightning output field, we are populating the field name with the references of these fields. So lightning data service pulls the data from these fields of this object and this record and shows this in the UI as a read-only form. So if you have a requirement where you want to show a read-only form using lightning web component, you can easily use this base component. The list is lightning record edit form. So lightning record edit form, using this base component, you can build a form. You will have total control over the creation and how you view the data in the UI. Let's go over to the UI example for this. So this is our lightning record edit form. We have imported this LWC component in our accounts lightning page. Now let's navigate to our VS Code and see the code snippet that we have written for this component, starting by. So for using lightning record edit form, we use the lightning record edit form base component. We name the object API name that we want to handle and the record ID of the record for which we want to use this base component. The attributes that we are using here: on submit and on success. And similar to our previous example where we used lightning output field, here we are using lightning input field because we want to take inputs from user and then save it in the UI. So this base component is mainly used for creating or updating a record. Our previous example, we used lightning record view form just for viewing a viewable form, but using lightning record edit form, you can create a form which has ability to create or edit a particular record. Then we have a button, lightning button. It's of type submit. Now let's go over to our JavaScript code, importing these fields for which we want to create data. So you should be aware of this syntax now. This should be clear as well. Now we have created two handlers in our JS file, as you can see, handle submit and handle success. So these two are very instrumental when we work with lightning record edit form. So let's explain what's happening here. So whenever we click on this button, the submit button, the form gets submitted. Whenever we click on a button which is inside a form and the button should be of type submit, the whole form gets submitted. That is the rule. And once it gets submitted, we have a submit handler. So we are telling the lightning record edit form, whenever the form gets submitted, call this method in our JavaScript. We are calling this method. It's submitted here. We are getting the form details and all the fields of the form here. We are storing those fields in the field variable. Then we are submitting the form using JavaScript. As you can see from this line, we are querying the lightning record edit form in our HTML. using query selector, and then submitting this form manually and passing all the fields. And these fields have the field and value mapped that we have populated in our UI. So let me show you how this works. Thing here is when we use a reference of the fields, it retrieves the value of this field for this particular object and shows it in these fields in the UI. Now any change that we make on these fields and we click on the save button, save actually calls our handle submit method in the JS file, and our JS file then gets the detail of the form submitted. So this event in the form submitted gets the fields, store that in a variable, and then we manually submit the form. Event.prevent default prevents us from refreshing the page. If you don't use this, on click of the button, the tendency of the button is to refresh this form. So to prevent a refresh of the form, we use event prevent default. And we are using another attribute here. This is callback, you can say it as a callback method. On success, we are using a handle success method. So once the form submission is successful, we call this, then we dispatch a toast message saying that information is saved. Let's do it again. Let's try to save the phone number and try to click on save. On click of this save, our handle save gets called, and once it is saved successfully, we are showing this toast message. So it gives us complete control on how the record is getting saved. We can go field by field. We can override a field like fields.street if we want to override a field in our JavaScript code, or we want to do some calculation on a particular field after it is getting submitted. We can do it right here. We can also do a JavaScript validation. So let's say if your requirement is to do a JavaScript validation which cannot be fulfilled with standard validation rule in Salesforce, then we have to use record edit form. We can access all the field values, do the validation, and we can update the fields here. So if you can see this commented line, if I uncomment this, the street value will be overridden with this value, and this value will get saved in the database. So using record edit form, you get the complete control of how to place the fields. You can also control how to show the fields, like the fields in a single column. You can divide the fields in two columns, left and right, using SLDS grid. So you have some amount of control in terms of UI, how you want to design it, and also you have complete control on the handle submit, using the handle submit method on how the form gets submitted. In this example, if you might have noticed, we have not used any Apex class. We have not made any call to the Apex class to handle any of the CRUD operations, neither to read data using a SQL query. Everything was handled beautifully by these base components and the underlying Lightning Data Service with the help of Lightning UI's Salesforce API. So it's a very, very powerful tool that you should use in your requirements, in your projects. In the next upcoming videos, we are going to talk about different wire adapters and wire services that we are going to use, and how are they different from the base components that we just discussed. If you like my video, please click on the like button and share it with your friends whom you think will benefit from this video. Thanks for watching.